Leslie, we'll get some paper towels real quick. I know, you guys are nervous because last time I stood behind this pulpit, it was a long sermon. So I'm not going to waste any time with friendly things. I'm just going to dive in, okay? I want to give you kind of a heads up. This is going to be a very, very hard sermon for me. And I probably say that a lot, almost every time I get up here. But this one has been a long time coming. I've been really kind of afraid to do this sermon. This is a sermon that I've tried to prepare multiple times throughout the last couple years, but something, either I chicken out and do something different, or a different topic has been given to me to preach on or whatever. But today, we're going to rip the Band-Aid off and let the blood splatter wherever it's going to land, right? And so, if you're going to take notes, I'm going to give you my outline. My outline is this. Roman numeral 1 is attitude. Roman numeral 2 is control. And Roman numeral 3 is freedom. Since the beginning of time, here on earth for man, we have a tendency to hurt one another. Not just, physically, but we also hurt one another emotionally, verbally, all kinds of different ways. And it's been something that has been happening since Adam and Eve were on this earth. The very first murder that happened was between two brothers. So that just kind of sets the pace of how mankind has been all the way through our lives, all the way through history. And because of this hurt, because of this pain, because of all these things that we do to one another, it has caused a divide. And honestly, some of these hurts, some of these destructions of relationships, they never mend. And it's because of what I'm going to be talking about this morning. It's going to be a very, very hard one because I've had to learn myself through pain and suffering and through things that people have said or done or whatever to me. I've had to learn this very same thing. Through lots and lots of conversations. I have people come up to me, not just here at church, but almost anywhere and everywhere I'm at, and they will tell me about what so-and-so has done to them. What pain and what suffering they've had to go through because of what somebody has said or because of an emotional damage that has been done to them. And oftentimes I will listen to it and I will be thinking to myself, how can I help this person? And so I will always ask at least one question to start out the conversation. And based on how you answer this question is how I'm going to move forward with how to help you with your situation. And that question is our topic for today. That question is, have you been able to, are you in a place where you can forgive? This word forgiveness is a very personal word. It is a very hard word for some of us. Because I know we have all been hurt deeply. We have had people do things to us that it's hard to get past. It's hard to mend through. But with this word forgiveness, we have to realize, we have to understand that if this does not happen, there's no way we're going to get through the issue. There's no way healing can begin. And so as we go through today, as we talk about this word forgiveness, I'm going to set a couple of ground rules. Ground rule number 1, I am not going to tell any personal stories about anybody else that I have talked to about this word forgiveness. I'm only going to talk about my stuff that I've dealt with, stuff that I've had to deal with. And it's going to sound like this sermon is about me, but I give myself permission to talk about myself freely. I haven't had permission to talk about anybody else's reasons why they need to forgive or ask for forgiveness. Second thing is please don't kill the messenger. I believe that this is a sermon that God has put on my heart and has finally led me to today to give this message. I understand that we have all had somebody hurt us very deeply, whether it's through physical, mental, or emotional. and probably even spiritual damage. We're going to skip all of that, and we're going to hopefully get to the end result. My goal today is based on the conversations I've had, based on things that I've had to learn in my life, is to get us to a point to where we can begin the healing process. And you're going to hear that phrase a lot this morning, healing process. Because that's what forgiveness is. It is a process. It is not something that we just say flippantly and hope that it's done. There's a whole process through it, and I believe that even as Christians, we have a hard time understanding this. And that's why we're stuck in our hurt. Second thing I want to lay down. Matthew chapter 5, Jesus is preaching a Sermon on the Mount. And he gives a rule, a law, if you will, of how we are supposed to live our lives as Christians. And one of the number one things that is preached on is love. This number two thing that is preached on, I would say, is this word forgiveness. And honestly, this word forgiveness can have so many directions that we could go, so many sermons that can come out of just this one topic. And the one that we hear the most is where Jesus is talking, and he tells us, he says, in his model prayer, in the Lord's Prayer, in Matthew chapter 5, verse 11, it says, verse 12, it says, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. This is the ESV version. There's other versions that say, forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. And then if you skip down to verse 14, it says, for if you forgive others their trespasses, the Heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. So the second rule that I want to hand out today is that we know as Christians we have to forgive. That's just a given. That is part of how we are. That's part of what Christ wants us to do to one another. And it's not just from Christian to Christian. It's also Christian to anybody. It's anybody that has done damage or hurt to us. And so this morning, we're going to get past that rule as well. And what I really want to focus on is not the who, not the where, not the whys, but the what. What does it look like? What does it take? What should I be doing in order to be able to get to the point of forgiveness? Are you ready? Are you with me so far? I know you're just as nervous as I am, so we're going to dive in. Let's go to number one, our attitude. Attitude is everything. As a kid, I was raised by my mom and dad that attitude is everything. If you have the right attitude, right things are going to happen. If you have a bad attitude, bad things are going to happen, right? And so it's also included in this. What is our attitude of forgiveness? What does the attitude of forgiveness look like? Well, in order for us to see what a good attitude and a bad attitude looks like, I'm going to have you turn to John chapter 8. There it is. John chapter 8. And this is a story that has been preached on a lot. This is a story that is not a secret. This is a story that we've heard a lot of times. But as I was going through and I was looking for ways to introduce what a good attitude looks like, this story came to mind. And it's because I think there's a lot of things, a couple of things that we kind of just skim through as we are studying this story, that we just kind of skip over. Not so much we say it, but maybe we just don't really understand the depth of what is going on here. So John chapter 8, and I have a note in my Bible that these verses, including the last verses of chapter 7, verse 53, are not actually in the original manuscripts. But it's in my Bible, and so I tend to believe that it is true, that it is there, for a purpose. And maybe that purpose is for what we're doing here this morning. So if you would, read with me. We'll start in verse 53 and carry on down. It says, they went to each their own house, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning he came again to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and placing her in the midst, they said to him, Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now in the law of Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. So what do you say? This they said to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her. And once more he bent down and wrote in the ground. When they heard it, they went away, one by one, beginning with the older ones. And Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus stood up and said to her, Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? She said, No one, Lord. And Jesus said, Neither do I condemn you. Go. From now on, sin no more. So this story is a story about Jesus, a woman, and a crowd. There's a group of lawmakers that have been trying to trap Jesus for a long time. Because Jesus is he's been one of those that kind of goes against the flow. He's not swimming the same direction as the rest of the fish, so to speak. Because he's teaching a whole different type of relationship. And here we see that Jesus is teaching a crowd of people. And there's a commotion that's happening, and along comes these men, dragging or carrying or pushing or whatever, but however it is, it's a loud commotion, and it causes Jesus to have to stop what he's doing. Now, there's some things in this that's not here, but as you will study this story, that kind of might help bring things around. There's some speculations of a few things here. One of the speculations that I've heard, I don't know how true it is. I don't know. It's not really that important, but I just want to throw this out there to you. One of the speculations that I've heard is that the woman that is caught in adultery is actually the wife of one of the Sadducees. And so that's why she's being drugged by the Sadducees and the Pharisees, because he's finally had enough, and here she's been caught in this issue, and so now they're going to bring her to Jesus. That's just a speculation I've heard. I don't know how true it is, but that may be a point in the story. But however it is, they bring this woman and they throw her before Jesus. And they're trying to catch Jesus in a clamp here. Because the law is that if you're caught in adultery, you're to be stoned to death. This is the law of Moses. This is what the law has been since Israel has been together. But Jesus is, like I said, he's kind of swimming a different direction here. He's teaching something different. And so the test is if Jesus says, hey, she's innocent, that he's going against the law of Moses. But if Jesus says she does deserve to die, she deserves to be stoned to death, let's do it right now, then he goes against what he's been teaching, and he's become a hypocrite. So how's this going to happen? What's going to happen here? How's this story going to happen? Well, this is where the attitude comes in. See, you have the attitude of the Sadducees and the Pharisees. They're angry, they're mad, they're wanting what they want out of this situation. A lot of times when we are hurt, when we are damaged, we have that same attitude. We want what we want out of this. We want to damage the other person. We want to embarrass the other person. We want to do whatever it takes to make the other person suffer, because that's what I'm doing. I'm suffering here. That's not a good attitude. But let's look at Jesus' attitude here. And a very key thing, this is one of the things that I believe that we kind of skip over, or at least I do when I read this story. Jesus is calm. He's collecting himself, and he leans down and he starts writing in the dirt. Now, this is another area of speculation. I've heard a lot of different things that people are trying to figure out what he's writing. And I don't know that it matters, again. I don't know that we'll ever really know what Jesus is writing. But one of the things that people think that Jesus is writing in the sand or in the dirt is all of the men's names that this woman has been with. That's just one of the things I've heard. Another thing that I've heard people say that Jesus is writing in the sand is all of the sins of all of the men that are dragging her before Jesus. Again, I don't know what it is. We don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us. That may be one of those questions that, hey, Jesus, when we get to heaven, hey, Jesus, what was it that you were writing? I have my own speculation that what he's writing in the sand. And I think it really fits because I want it somewhat to fit into what I'm preaching about this morning. I think he's writing something to the effect of either I'm about to die for your sins or your sins will be forgiven. Something along those lines. Again, I don't know. But based on his attitude, based on what we read coming up, that sounds more like something that Jesus would do instead of reminding them of what they do. But here's the key part that I really want to key in on. As he's writing in the sand, and these Pharisees are asking him to make a judgment, Jesus' attitude changes everything. When he says one phrase, if you have no sin, you can cast the first stone. And we read one by one, starting with the oldest. They drop their stones and they walk away. See, with this one phrase, what Jesus has done is changed how people should look at how things are done. All my life, I have been bombarded with these I forget what they call them, but surveys, I guess you would call them. Rate my job from 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best. Rate my food 1 to 10 or 1 to 5. Rate my service. Rate this. We rate things. We put things in certain levels. We put things in worst to best or worst to easiest or whatever it is. And we do that as well with sin. And we do that as well as with things that have hurt us in our lives. This is the only mention I'm going to have in my sermon about what people do to one another. But this is to kind of make my point here. We tend to put things like rape and child molestation way up on top of the list as the worst thing we have ever had done or worst thing that could ever be done to anybody. And then somewhere down the list a little bit, we have divorce and adultery. And a little bit further down the list, we have things like I've been lied to. I've been physically hurt. And then way down at the bottom, we have things like I was cut off in traffic on Clark Lane this morning. We put things on levels. We put things on lists. But here's what Jesus has done. What Jesus did is he knocked all that out and he put everything on the same level. Because as much as you have hurt me, guess what? I have hurt somebody else. And it doesn't matter what the hurt is, I have hurt somebody. I have said something that I probably shouldn't have said. I've physically done something I shouldn't have said. I didn't do something that I promised I would do. I did something I promised I wouldn't do. Whatever it is, it's not any different in Jesus' eyes than what people have done to me. I am no different, I am no better, I am no worse than anybody else. And before you start throwing your spears and your daggers at me, I realize that there are things, again, that we deem as very, very hurtful. And I'm not discounting that in your life. That is something that you have to decide for yourself. But when Jesus puts things on the same level, puts us all on the same plane, that should change our attitude. Instead of my attitude being, hey, you hurt me really, really bad, I'm going to hurt you back. It should be, you know what? Yes, you have hurt me, but I've hurt somebody else. And just as much as I need to forgive you, you need to forgive me. And just as much as you need to forgive me, I need to forgive others. See, that should change our whole attitude. And when that attitude change happens, then there's a healing process that can start. It took me a long time to realize that my issues in my life is no different than others. And I'm going to tell you a couple of quick stories throughout my sermon. I'm going to tell you this one as an example of a bad attitude to have when giving forgiveness. I was 5 years old when I was adopted the first time. I had a mom who was very abusive and had all kinds of issues my first time. I'm going to skip that story for just a minute. My next home that I went into, I was 5 years old, and I was adopted into a home where I was supposed to take the place of a child that died at birth. It was not a good situation for me. It was not a good situation for them because I come with a lot of baggage. I came with a lot of attitude. I came with a lot of, I was tore away from my sister that I took care of for 3 years. I was an angry kid. I had issues. They had issues, and so it became a very abusive situation. I was physically, emotionally, mentally, verbally abused. And I was finally taken out. It was about 7.5 years I was in that home, and when I was finally taken out, my first foster home I went to was a Methodist preacher. And he was trying to get me to a point of forgiveness. And he was talking to me about it. You're a very angry kid. You need to let this anger go so that you can start this process of healing through this situation in your life and blah, 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 right? That was my whole attitude. I don't want to hear this. But then I kind of started listening. I was like, okay, well, how do I need to do this? How do I start this process? He goes, well, maybe you need to confront them. Maybe you need to talk to them. Maybe you need to let them know how this made you feel. Get it all out. Put it all out on the table, talk it through, and start healing from that. So I said, okay, well, I'm not going to go see him. He said, here's the phone. And he handed me the phone, and I dialed the phone number, and the dad answered the phone. And I don't know what happened. I don't know. I don't remember all the words I said. All I remember is something snapped at me as soon as I heard his voice. And I laid out a whole string of words that there is nobody on this earth should ever say, let alone a 12-year-old. And I let him have every bit of my anger that I had in my whole 12-year-old body, which was not much bigger than Tate's. But I let him have every bit of it. And I was so angry, I was so mad, and I told him about how much hurt he did, how much damage he did to my life, and how much I hated him, and how much... And I just kept going and kept going. It took about 15 minutes. And finally, at that last little bit, I said, by the way, I forgive you. Slam the phone down. That's not a good attitude. That's not what Christ would have wanted me to do. So my encouragement to you is that if you would consider what Jesus has done here by putting all of us on the same level, and consider that you have done almost as much damage to other people as have been done to you, that could be the key that changes you. And that will allow a healing process to start. The second thing that I believe we need to work on is control. And it's a matter of who should have control over us. Who has control over us? Who do we allow to have control over us? There's 3 different types of control in a situation where we have been hurt, where we need to be either asking for forgiveness or giving forgiveness. And these 3 areas, I believe, 2 of them you give up control. In one area you take control. And I don't know how to rate them really because they're all just as important. But if I was going to rate them from, again, here we are rating things, right? But if I was going to rate them as a level of most important to least important, I'm going to start with the least important. Number 3, the very bottom of the control issue, is that you need to give up control back to the person that has hurt you. When you say, Chris, well, what are you talking about? They don't have control over them. Oh, yes, they do. some of these conversations that I've had with some people, in our conversation, we talk about how they can't stand being around this person. It's for good reason, I'm sure. And it gets to a point to where, for example, if they happen to be in the same room, one person, we'll just say me, sees the person that has hurt me across the room, just starts shaking, get angry, start thinking things that I probably shouldn't be thinking of the other person. In fact, the only thing I want to do is leave, because I can't even stand being or seeing around this person. That's because they have control over your emotions. We don't realize it, but we have allowed them to live rent-free in our brains, because every time they come to mind, anger, hatred, words that we shouldn't be saying, thoughts that we shouldn't be thinking, comes back to it. And it really doesn't have a whole lot to do with the actual issue itself. It's how we feel towards that person because of that issue. And when we get to that point, we have allowed them to control our emotions. We've allowed them to control our thoughts. We've allowed them to control our feelings. If we could release that control back to them, there's an opportunity where things will even out. I've had some people do some pretty awful things to me. And I'll talk about it a little bit more down the road, but one of these situations is that I released control back to them. I no longer allowed them to live rent-free in my brain, and I was able to actually be in the same room. Not only in the same room, but I was able to go up and have a good, kind, loving conversation with these people. Now, I'm not saying that you have to do that. I'm not saying that that hurt is not valid enough that you have to be able to get to this point, but isn't this really where we need to get to? For true forgiveness brings in love. And God also commands us to love one another. It's awful hard for us to love one another when we have hatred towards one another. And that hatred needs to be released back to them. Let them have it back. Second control, the one that we really need to take back, is the control that Satan has over us. This is a hard one. Because we think that we are in control of our emotions. We think that we are in control of our thoughts. We think that we are in control of the things that we think or the things that we say. But if we have hatred in our hearts, if we are saying things that, we're having conversations with somebody and the first thing that comes out is how bad this person is. That's Satan. He is wanting this. Satan is desiring for these feelings, these thoughts, these words to continue on against this person. Because as long as this is happening, then you're never going to be able to heal. You're never going to be able to move forward. You're never going to be able to get to a place where you could say, I love this person again. And Satan loves that part of it. He has you where he wants you. He has you even away from God, because a lot of times our situations pull us away from God. Our thoughts are not of God when Satan has control. Our words are not of God when Satan has control. Our feelings are not God's if Satan is in control. And so if you're would ever be able to take that control away from Satan, then 2 and 3 are going to kind of work together. They're going to be awesome. They're going to be able to start a healing process. But the number one thing, the person who should have control over us, no matter what the situation was, is God. We go back to our story, we see the calmness that Jesus had. He could have very easily got up and pointed his finger at the woman and said, yes, they're right, you should die. He very easily could have went over to the Sadducees and the Pharisees and really laid into them. Put it all out on the line. You guys are just as horrible as they are. In fact, later on we hear that he calls them certain names and he's angry with them, and that's justified anger. But he really could have laid them out, could have embarrassed him in front of everybody, could have done all these things, but he kept his control. He wanted to teach a lesson here. He wanted to make sure that everybody in this situation knew where he stood. When we allow God to take control over us, we tend to let things go. We tend to let things be what they are. My wife will tell you that I have a saying that I say very often. It is what it is. I don't need the control over this. I don't want the control over this situation. My abuse that I had with that dad, I was not in control, but I was in control. I got to control what I said. I got to control what I felt. I got to control how I dealt with the situation. But when I finally, at some point, gave that control away from God, or gave that control to God, something else happened. There was a change. I was able to get past the situation. I was able to get past the abuse. I was able to get past all the verbal things that was ever said to me. And there were some pretty hard things. They were some pretty mean things. I was able to get past all of that. And I was able to get to a point to where I could say that I truly loved these people. An example of giving God control, I told you my mom, my birth mom, for the first 5 years of my life, I was in and out of the home. Until probably I was age 4, I was actually permanently taken away from her. She signed off her rights to me. Now, she still got to see me, and every time she saw me, I was angry. I had 2 half-sisters. One of them I did not know was my sister until later on in life. She was my cousin, as far as I knew, because before I could walk and talk, she was adopted to my aunt. And my younger sister, we were moved from foster home to foster home until she was actually put back in Mom's house. And probably one of the deepest things that hurt me the most about my mom wasn't the fact of the neglect, wasn't the fact of the verbal abuse, wasn't the fact that the boyfriends that she had abused me as well. But it was the fact that she took my sister back, and the reason she didn't take me back is because she couldn't handle me. She didn't want me in her life anymore because I was different. I was too hard to live with. I was too hard to do whatever her excuse was. And when I was age 5 and I was adopted, the last time I got to see my sisters and my mom were at a park in St. Joe, Missouri, because I just lived a little bit north from there. And this was the very last time I was ever going to see them for a long time. For about 30 years. And my sisters and I, we were sitting there, we were playing around on the jungle gyms and whatnot, you know, the things that they've taken away from parks now because they're afraid you're going to break your neck. But they were fun back then. But we were playing on it, and I have pictures of us together, and my mom was there for her last time to see me, and she made everything about her. It wasn't about me being able to go to a good family. It wasn't about me being able to move on with my life. It was about how glad she was that all these good things were happening, and how glad she was that she didn't have to have me in the house. And it was all about her, and I was so angry. 30 years later, I got back in contact with my older sister. She'd been looking for me for a long time and finally got in contact. And about 2 years after we started talking back and forth again, she said, "By the way, Mom wants to see you." My first thought was, so? I don't care if she wants to see me or not. I got nothing to say to her. I have nothing. I don't want anything to do with her anymore. She gave me away. And she was happy about it. That was a deep hurt. That was the most hurtful thing. Finally, over some time after praying about it and thinking about it, I agreed. I said, okay, let's meet. And so at a park, may have been the same one, I don't know, at a park in St. Joe, we ride with my older sister from Kansas City down there. It's my wife and my 2 older kids at the time, and I don't remember if Tate was born yet or not, but it doesn't matter. We're there, and my older sister and I, we're sitting at the table My younger sister walks in, and that's a beautiful, wonderful reunion with her. I took care of her for about 3 years. It was just her and I. I was her protector. She was my everything, and she was ripped out of my arms one day. And finally, to be able to put her back in my arms and give her a hug was a great thing. And we're sitting there at the table, we're talking about how things are going in our own separate lives, how good life has been, and how we missed seeing one another, and all these things were going on, and all of a sudden my mom walks in. And she's meeting all the family members that I have no idea who they are. Don't remember any of them, but she's meeting all of them. Oh, I get to see my son today. And every time I heard her voice, it brought back the memory of the last time I saw her. Because she made everything about her again. And up to this point, I thought I was in control. I thought I had the control I needed to be able to see my mom. And I'm a fight or flight kind of guy. If I think I can take you, I'm going to fight you. If it's a situation I need to flee from, I'm ready to go. And at that point, when she walks in and starts talking about how she's so happy to get to see her baby boy and how she's missed him and all these things, even though yet for 30-some years, not a single word ever came out of her, I was ready to get up and leave. Because these feelings of hatred, these feelings or these emotions of sadness and anger came back. And as I'm sitting there, she finally comes over and she sits down and she starts talking to me and starts asking questions about how life's been, what's been going on, how old my kids are, and all these things. And I'm praying, God, you're going to have to take control here. I don't know what to do. I want to leave, but yet I know there needs to be closure in my life for this situation. God, please take over. Take this from me. And as she's sitting there, she's talking about all these things about how her life is and all the good things about her and everything else. This little voice in the back of my head says, it's time. It's time to forgive her. So in mid-sentence, I said, stop. Just stop. I got to say something to you. I've got to let you know this, and then we can move on with life. I said, I just want you to know, I forgive you. I forgive you for all of the things that happened with my first 5 years of life. I forgive you for all the years that we have not said anything to one another. I forgive you for the last time I saw you. And I just laid it out to her. These are the things I'm forgiving you for. And she's just sitting there in silence. My younger sister doesn't know what to do. She's never been in church her whole life. My older sister is just smiling. Because we've had a conversation that, we need to do this. And I finally laid it all out, and I was done. And I was ready to go. I was at peace. Because I allowed God to have control, but the very last thing my mom ever said to me should have really made me angry. What she said was, I have never done anything to you to need to be forgiven for. I should have been so mad. I should have been so angry. I should have just punched her in the nose. Right? Because that's the kind of control I wanted to have. But instead, what I had already done is I had given that control to God. And I said, God, take this from me. Take control of this situation. And when she said that, I said, okay, I'm done. And I got up and I gathered our family and we left. I was calm. I was cool. I was collected. I got in the car and my sister looked at me. She goes, how did you do that? And I started shaking. I started getting nervous. And I was like, I don't know. But the truth of the matter is because I gave God control. God did a wonderful thing through me because I was not in control any longer. He was. And because of that, I'm able to heal. I'm no longer angry at my mom. I'm no longer angry at the things that she said or the things that she did. In fact, I think it was 2 months later, on a Sunday morning, my younger sister calls and says, hey, Mom passed away. And I said, I'm sorry for that. She goes, are you sad? And I said, well, not really. I'm sad for you, but not for me. I haven't seen the woman once in 30 years. I got nothing to be sad about because I gave that control to God. So if you have your attitude correct and you give the control where it needs to be, the number 3, there's a freedom. There is a freedom through forgiveness. There is a freedom through being able to get to a point to where you are able to forgive somebody. That you are free. God takes the burden away from you. And you are free of your feelings. You are free of your thoughts. You're free to have a good attitude. And you're free to start your healing. There's another story that we use a lot about forgiveness and about how we come back to Christ, and it's in Luke chapter 15. If you want to turn there with me, I'm not going to read the whole story. I'm going to read just a little bit of it. And this is the story of the prodigal son. And I'll just kind of start telling you a little bit of the story as you're looking for it. We have a son who decides that he no longer want to be under his dad's rule anymore. And so he goes to his dad and he says, "Dad, give me my inheritance that I deserve." And that word deserve was kind of an iffy word to use if you ask me, because really he didn't deserve anything because his dad wasn't dead yet. But his dad gave him the inheritance that he should have got, as if his dad passed away. And he took this inheritance and he went and he squandered it on prostitutes and rich living and gambling and all kinds of different things that he was doing in his own life. And a famine came across the land and he had no money. All his friends, when he had money, the friends that he had, when he lost all his money, they walked away and left him. And so he's poor, he's destitute, what am I going to do now? And so he goes and he gets a job with a farmer who has pigs. And if you know anything about the Jewish people, they don't deal with pigs. That's not a good thing. That's the bottom of the line. That's almost like being a ditch digger in our time. Not that it's bad if anybody's here is a ditch digger. But growing up, ditch diggers were the bottom of the line. They were always dirty, nasty people. And if you had pigs, if you worked with pigs, that was dirty, nasty job. But it was so bad that this guy would eat what the pigs were supposed to be eating. And he got to a point where he's like, I can't do this anymore. I've got to figure out another way of life. And so he makes his plan. He says, I'm going to go home. And I'm going to beg my father for forgiveness. Because I know I've damaged our relationship. I know I've hurt our relationship. But I'm going to go to my father and I'm going to say, I need to be your slave. I'm no longer your son. Now I'm your slave. And so this is where I'm going to pick up our reading. The boy is almost home. Excuse me. I got to find it here. Okay, here we go. Verse 20. And he says that he rose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And he said to his son, Father, and the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Bring quickly the robe, put it on him. Put a ring on his hand, shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. There's two things that are happening here. You have the son who's coming and asking his father for forgiveness. And he realizes that, Father, I've damaged this relationship. I've got to a point in our relationship that I should no longer be called your son. And his son, and he's humbled himself. He's given God the control over whatever the situation is. He is having the right attitude, but he's coming before his father and says, Father, forgive me. And the story says that his father sees him from a long way. And this is another example of a good attitude that we should have when we need to give forgiveness. See, this gives a connotation that his father has been watching for his son to return. His father has the attitude of forgiveness already. Because when he sees his son, he runs to him. He doesn't stay on the porch and say, you got to come to me. He runs to him. And has already, seems like has already forgiven him, because he tells his servants, go get the best robe, go get the best ring, my ring. Not just the best ring, but get him my ring. And kill the fattened calf that is only supposed to be used for sacrifice. Because my son is home. His father has already forgiven him. There is a freedom that has happened here. The son was free to be able to be humble enough to go before his father because he gave the control up. He wanted to have the right attitude. And now he's free to go before his father again and beg for that forgiveness. And his father was free enough in forgiving him. And that's exactly what happened. If we were to continue to read this story, there's another person in this story that is not so free. It says, now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing, and he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has received him back safe and sound. But he was angry and refused to go in. He was angry and he refused to go in. His brother was not free. His brother was still bound by a bad attitude. He was still bound by what control was being had over him. And he was not free enough to forgive. See, his brother felt like he had been wronged. Dad, I've been with you this whole time, and not even once have you given me a lamb that I might celebrate with my friends. There's hatred. There's control. There's a bad attitude in the son. I told you about the abusive situation and about how I, quote unquote, forgave my first adoptive dad. I'm in my second adoption now. I'm about 17 years old. And I don't remember what I had just got back from. I think it was like a track meet or something that I had at school. I had just got home. It was a Saturday afternoon, and there was a sale in town. And my parents had gone to this sale, and I was getting ready to go up and meet them. And I'm mulling around. I'm doing what I got to do to prepare to get out the door, and there's a knock on the door. And I thought, oh, my buddy's here. We're going to go up to the sale together. Good. I didn't know he was even around. I thought maybe he was already there. But I went and I opened the door. And there stood my first adopted dad. This is the guy that about 4 or 5 years earlier, I had cussed out and given him so much attitude. And these thoughts come back, oh, the last time I talked to you was not a good thing. And of course, he's surprised as he sees me standing in the door, and my older adopted brother was there with him, walking around with him, and he's surprised, and the look on their face, and probably the same look I had on my face was, oh, how's this going to go? And of course, there was the niceties, and hey, how are you doing? Hey, I'm here in town. Is your mom and dad home? No, they're up at the sale. Oh, well, I must have missed them. But I'm in town soliciting votes to be a senator. So I thought I would just talk to him about what my platform is going to be, blah, blah, blah. And so he kind of gives me the spiel real quick. And he starts asking questions about how I've been, how things are going. And I'm standing there and I'm nervous. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to deal with this issue that is now standing before me. And again, in the back of my mind, I hear this voice say, Chris, it's time to forgive him. And so he's standing there talking and asking questions, and my brother's talking, and finally I just put my hands up. I say, stop. I got to say something. I said, I know last time that you and I talked, it was on the phone, and it was not a great conversation. It was a horrible conversation. It's not something that you ever should have heard from a 12-year-old's mouth. It's not something you should ever hear from anybody. And I want to just say, I'm sorry for that. But even more important to that is I know there's been a lot of time and a lot of water has gone under the bridge, but I just have to tell you this. This time I mean it. I truly, honestly forgive you. And it was at that moment that I felt a burden lifted off of my shoulders. It was at that moment my heart just fluttered. It wasn't because of nervousness. It was because I'd released control to God. And my attitude was in the right place. And I had freedom from the situation. And as I'm looking at myself and feeling, what am I feeling? What's going on in my own body? I look up and this 250 pounds, 280 some pound, 6'3" man that has been the one that has hurt me multiple times, over and over and over, is standing on the porch with tears coming out of his eyes. And my old brother's looking at him, and he's looking at me, and he's looking at him. He's not sure what's going on either. But he said, the dad, he's trying to tell me something. And he's through all the tears and the crying that's going on. Finally, my older brother says, I think what he wants you to hear is that just a few weeks ago, he gave his life to Christ. And he was fully forgiven from all the things that he did through Christ. And that this is the one thing he needed to hear. Because now healing can begin. And this was the relationship that later on my brother and I, my older brother in that adoption, we just lived a few blocks away when I lived in Ashland. And every once in a while we would go to his house, and my mom and my dad would be there. His mom and dad, not mine anymore, but they would both be there. And I didn't get a chance to say anything to the mom because she wasn't there at the time, but the first time I saw her, I was able to walk up to her and say, hey, I just want you to know I'm going to clear the air right now. I forgive you. And at this point, I haven't seen him in a long time, but we were able to sit down and have a good conversation about life. We didn't have to worry about bringing up the past. We didn't have to worry about bringing up bad feelings or how we're going to mend one another because we had given up that control. We had decided to have good attitudes. And we were able to heal together. There's a situation that happened in court. And I'm going to conclude with this. This is really going to drive home my whole point of what I wanted to do today. There's a news thing that came out. It became a whole story. There was a murder that happened. I don't remember if it was gang related or how it happened, but a young man killed another young man. And they're at the trial, and the judgment is about to be given. And at every trial for one of these situations, the family of the one that has had the damage has an opportunity to speak to the defendant. And in this one situation, the mom stands up, and they're separated across the room. And she stands up and she starts talking, and she goes, this is not going to be a normal speech that parents have. I'm not going to spew hatred towards you. I'm not going to be the one that's going to be judging you. I'm not going to be angry with you anymore. In fact, I want you to know something. I want you to know that I have forgiven you. And I want you to know that I love you. And I want you to know that I want the best for you. This is a mom of a child who's been killed by this man, and she's looking this man eye to eye, and she's able to say these things. She's able to give this attitude, and she's able to give this control. And as she's speaking, she says, Judge, if it's okay with you, I'd like to do something that has never been done before, that is not normal. Your Honor, if it's okay, I'd like to come down and give this young man a hug. I don't see any law against that. That's fine. And of course, all the security comes around him because they don't know what's going to happen. And this woman walks up And she gives this guy a hug. And she says, my son's death, although it happened at your hands, it's in God's hands now. I love you. She turned around and walked away. That is what true forgiveness looks like. That is what, that's the point that I want to make this morning. I know that we have all been hurt. We've all had issues. We've all had damage done to any kind of a relationship, whether it's through words, physical activity, mental activity, or emotional activity. And a lot of it cuts very, very deeply. I understand that. I'm not going to ever take that away from you. But if there's one thing that I've been praying about here for this morning, and that's for a mending of relationships. That's for a mending of your relationship with God. That's for a mending of your relationship with anybody that may have done damage to you. In the light of transparency, something else I prayed for this week, in preparation for my sermon, I try not to be a hypocrite. Doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes I am. But I prayed a lot this week about me preaching this specific topic. Me having to forgive others. Me having to mend relationships. And so one of the things that I prayed for is that, God, if there is anybody in our congregation, anybody that is listening to my voice, whether it's here in seat, in Zoom, or possibly even later on watching it on YouTube, whoever it might be, if there's anybody that I need to forgive, let it happen. Take the control. Give me the attitude. And if it's one of you, let's have that conversation. I'm ready to mend my relationship with you. Be nice. Have the right attitude. Give God the control. Be nice. The other thing that I prayed for was, God, if there's anybody that I need to forgive, anybody that's sitting here in these seats, anybody on Zoom land, anybody on YouTube that's hearing my voice. Because let's face it, we're all humans, right? We've all hurt one another here inside, even inside these walls. And I've been hurt emotionally, verbally. But that's okay. God gave me broad shoulders. I can handle it. But I just want you to know you're forgiven. Not with just a blanket statement, but true, honest forgiveness. There's one more thing that I want to talk about, and it'll be very brief. And I believe this is probably one of the hardest things that as humans we encounter. There's been people that have climbed Mount Everest and have said this is the hardest thing that they've ever had to do. There's people that have had to deal with fears of spiders and snakes. But they say that's the hardest thing they've ever had to encounter. But I want to say that I believe that this is the hardest thing that we will ever have to do in our lives. There's one more kind of forgiveness that needs to be given. And that's forgiveness for yourself. The hardest thing for me is to forgive myself when I make a mistake. And I make a lot of them. But it's very important that you take what I've spoken this morning and use that for you as well. You need to have the right attitude. You need to give God control. And you need to be free to forgive yourself. Jesus, when he was on the cross, he only said 3 phrases. And one of those phrases that he said kind of really sets the whole thing. And the phrase was, Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do. And there's speculation about this as well. There's many people who think that Jesus is talking to the Roman soldiers and the people that have put him on the cross. There's people that say that he is talking to the crowd that is spewing vile and saying bad things to him, mocking him. There's people, and this is probably the closest one that I could think of, because it's also at the same time that there's two thieves, one on each side of him, that are spewing vile things and saying. This is at that same time that Jesus says this phrase. But I think it goes a little bit deeper than that. I'm not going to tell you that this is fact. I'm not going to tell you that this is the absolute truth. But I think, in my opinion, that phrase, Jesus forgive them for they not know what they do, is a blanket statement for all time. It is as effective for what happened on the cross as it is for us today. Because oftentimes we don't even know what we've done. We don't know who we've hurt. We don't know who we've damaged a relationship with. And if that's the case, there is forgiveness for that as well. My goal today, my hope today, is that even if one person can come to a place where they're able to fully, 100%, and honestly forgive somebody, then the Holy Spirit has done what He was supposed to do through me. So I want to give you a challenge. And I want to close with this. If there's anybody in your life, it doesn't matter whether they're still alive, whether they're dead, whether they're here, whether they're out there somewhere. It doesn't matter who it is. And it doesn't matter what the situation is. If there is anybody in your life, in order for you to be able to continue and to be able to get healing, that you need to forgive, now's the time to do that. Now's the time to ask God to help you change your attitude. Now's the time to give God that control and to give control back to the other person and to take that control over you from Satan. Now is that time for you to be able to feel that freedom of getting that burden taken away from you and to begin that healing process that has to happen. Because without forgiveness, you will never heal. And the only way you're going to be able to get through this is not by yourself, but you're going to have to use God. You're going to have to go through God. You're going to have to go with God in order to do this. So if you're here this morning and you have somebody that you would like to but you're not sure exactly how to take those steps forward or whatever, Carrie, if you don't mind, Carrie's going to be back there. If you're a female and you feel comfortable enough to go back and talk to Carrie, that's great. Do that this morning. We would love to pray with you. She would love to pray with you. If you're anybody else and you want to do that, if you know that you need to get forgiveness as much as you need to give forgiveness, now is the time to do that. Today is that day. This is the invitation that I'm going to give you. If you have or need that opportunity, come do that. Come take care of it. Don't leave here with that burden anymore. Leave here free. Leave here healed.